goes here. It applies. The concept applies here. Okay, we're not here because it's Wednesday. We're here because we want to worship God and we have the opportunity to do it. And if we could do it in the park on Tuesday or you can do it at work on Thursday, that's what we're really into. We're into doing that. Let me get some glasses so I can read. Mary Lou still has good eyes, so she has a Bible that has like micro print. It's very small. We're going to do an introduction to Proverbs because we're going to be studying that for a while, all right? And her Bible just has a really good thing about what Proverbs is. And it says Proverbs is for people to learn how to attain wisdom, be disciplined, and live a prudent life, and to do what is right and fair and ethical. In short, to apply divine wisdom to daily life. That's very interesting. A lot of times we know what's right to do. It's just a matter of doing it. And so Proverbs is there, and that's part of it. So, oh yeah, here we are right here. Okay, good. If we can go to the next slide, please. All right. I always like to put context on what we're talking about and what the time frame is and everything. So this is about 970 to 930 BC, before Christ. So we've talked about the Assyrians and the Babylonians and all that. This is before them. And it was one of the times when Israel was united. It was called the United Israel. And so if you look at the red is the territory of Israel before David became king. Then the area conquered by David is kind of the orange, okay? And David was Solomon's father, and the area of strong economic influence that was spread out by Solomon. And if you look at it, it kind of comes up to where Egypt is. They touched the water here, and they went all the way up to the Euphrates. So it's interesting, where the land is. The other thing that's interesting is a lot of people say Israel never existed. They came in and took the land away from the Palestinians. Okay, here's 1,000 years before Christ, and Israel was there. Now we'll talk about what happened to it after that a little bit. Okay, next slide, guys, if you can, please. Okay, so we have to understand some of the terms that are there. So when you say a proverb, a lot of people, when I ask them, I say, what do you think a proverb is? They had different explanations, and we don't have to get into this. This isn't English class, so you're going to be tested on all the P words and stuff, okay? But if you look at it, a proverb is a short saying that states the general truth and gives good advice, okay? A promise is a declaration and assurance that one will do something or that a particular thing will happen. So a proverb is not a promise. And a promise can be part of a proverb, but they're different. A precept is a general rule intended to regulate behavior or thought. A parable is a simple story used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson. And a prophecy is a prediction. And in the biblical sense, you had to speak prophecy and it had to come true. So, people say, well, Nostradamus was true most of the time. He only failed about 25% of the time. In biblical terms, if you made a prophecy and it didn't come true, you were to be killed, just so you know. So they had a very strict standard. Okay, next slide, guys. Okay, then understanding terms. So we have knowledge and wisdom. It says that Proverbs is a book of wisdom. And there are actually 3 books of wisdom that Solomon was a part of. And it was his sayings and so forth. And if we look at knowledge, knowledge is facts, information, and skills acquired through experience or education, including both theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. All right, so that's just pure raw knowledge. Wisdom is the quality of having experienced knowledge and good working judgment, the quality of being wise. The Hebrew word was kahokmah, okay, which implies the skilled use of knowledge. So the best thing I could think of to kind of go with that is in knowledge, we know that tomatoes and avocados are fruits. They're not vegetables. A lot of people think they are, but they're fruits. Wisdom is not putting those in a fruit salad. Okay? So it's how you apply it that counts, okay? All right, guys, next one, please. Okay, so then we need to know who's Solomon. Why do we care what Solomon says? You know, who is he? So we're not going to be studying Solomon, but we need to understand who he is, all right? So in lineage, King Solomon was the third king and the last king of the United Legacy Kingdom that was known as the United Israel, okay? He was the son of King David and Bathsheba. That's a whole nother story to look into sometime. And succeeded his father after David's death. He reigned for about 40 years from 970 to 931 BC. And the thing to remember is BC, remember, it counts down in years where now it counts up. Okay, next slide, guys. Okay, so in Solomon, wisdom in his early years. At the start of his rule, Solomon sought God's guidance and asked for wisdom to govern justly. It actually says that he asked that he have a heart of discernment. So he didn't really ask for wisdom. He asked for a heart of discernment. And that's kind of an interesting point to think. So maybe he was a brainiac. It doesn't necessarily say that. But if I had a choice between being able to do unlimited math equations or having discernment, I'd take discernment every time, okay? So God granted wisdom, knowledge, and wealth beyond any other king at that time, along with honor and peace on all sides. And that's in 1 Kings 1:29 to 33. It talks about that. There's a little side story. It says his wisdom was so renowned that the Queen of Sheba traveled 1,200 miles away to come and test it, to say, hey, let's see if this guy's really this wise. Okay, next one. His early success, he reigned and was marked by economic prosperity, alliance, and trade. His most enduring legacy is the construction of the first temple at Jerusalem, fulfilling his father's vision. He is traditionally credited as the primary source of the biblical books of wisdom, which is Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Songs. Now, so those were all three. Everybody kind of knows Proverbs goes back to Solomon, but it's interesting because they each have their own state. This is kind of like his early young years. This is like his middle marriage years. And a lot of this is kind of at the end where he's looking back on life, okay? Next one, guys. His decline. In his later years, Solomon married 700 women and had 300 concubines. Okay, that's not a wise guy, okay? When I was traveling up to Utah, I encountered where there was real polygamy actually occurring, and Mary Lou said, well, maybe you want a second wife. And I go, yeah, then I can disappoint 2 women. No, thank you. Okay, so anyway, and many of them were foreign women, okay? So it says, and this led him to worship other gods. His first wife was Pharaoh's daughter, okay? So he had all this stuff coming in. And the idolatry that he had angered God. And after his death, his son Rehoboam was harsh in policies, caused the northern tribes to rebel, splitting the kingdom of Israel into the north, which kept the name Israel, and Judah, which was the south. So that's kind of how we get to all that. The other thing is, Solomon wasn't just a great guy. When you read some of the historical accounts, he was very harsh on his people. He taxed very heavily. He had a draft just when he wanted to build something. He's known for building great structures. He just went out and drafted his people and said, hey, you're going to work for me like a slave if we don't have enough slaves. So he wasn't, a perfect guy. Who was the perfect guy? Jesus was the perfect guy. He's the only perfect guy. Okay, I guarantee you, you can put a label on me, consultant, pastor, Boy Scout leader, whatever it is, I will disappoint you sooner or later because I'm human. I am a flawed vessel that has flesh. I try as hard as I can with God, submitting to that. But Jesus is the only one that did it right. And Solomon was a man. He was a wise man, and God used him. But he was a man, and he had flaws too. Next one, guys. Okay. So Solomon's legacy to remember, he was wise, wealthy, powerful king, brought Israel to its peak before it split. He's also a ruler whose later failures led to the kingdom's division. He is revered in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam for his wisdom, devotion to God, and monumental building projects. Kind of interesting, we forget that the early patriarchs, which, the founding fathers, were founding fathers across all the major faiths. Okay, we don't think that Islam, thinks of Abraham and Solomon and people like that, and they do. That's a big part of their foundation. And sometimes areas, if you're ever witnessing to them, you can go back to that, and they will agree of who those people are. It's only when it gets down to Muhammad and stuff that it changes. Okay, next one, guys. Okay, kind of the sections, the table of contents. So we're not actually going to get into the chapters yet, but 1 through 9 are the Proverbs of Solomon. 10 through 29 are ancient Proverbs. 30 is from King Agar. 31 is Lemuel. And as we get to those, we'll say why they were there. It doesn't actually say in the text that Solomon wrote Proverbs. It says these are the sayings of Solomon. Okay? So there's some great Proverbs, okay, that are out there. It even says that he got some of these, they were things he had learned, that had been passed down, words of wisdom. So my grandfather told me one time, I guess you could call it a proverb. He said, if you have to eat a frog, don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. Throw them in your mouth and swallow them and get on with it. Okay? Now, those are words of wisdom. It wasn't necessarily about eating frogs, right? It was about getting on when you got to get on, even when you got to do something you don't want to do. Okay? And those words have stuck with me for all the years. And sometimes even I've taught my boys that, and they'll be complaining. I go, so just eat the frog, dude. Okay? And then they move on. Okay, next one. Oh, anyway, okay, so Book of Proverbs is divided into 7 main sections, each with distinct authorship and theme. So the overview, the 7 sections, and we're just going to do this, and then we'll talk for a minute. But section 1 is Proverbs 1 to about 9, and it's a prologue in wisdom for younger people. It applies to everybody, but it's a father talking to his son. And a lot of people say, well, how come it only talks about men? It's kind of because it was the way things were done in the day, okay? But it applies. Every truth that's in there applies to women too, okay, females. Section 2, Proverbs 10 to 22, and those are solemn Proverbs, Solomon Proverbs. And then when you get to section 3, which is 22 to 24, it's the saying of the wise. Okay, next one, guys. Then there's another section, and it says additional sayings of the wise, and it specifically says that in the word. It lists the first ones, and it says, and here are more sayings. Okay, so we don't know exactly why it says that, but it does, so we have to honor what the word says. Then in section 5, which goes from Proverbs 25 to 29, that's Hezekiah's collection of Solomon's Proverbs. So it's almost like when your grandfather was telling a story or something, and then he kind of ends, and grandma or an auntie goes, oh, yeah, don't forget when that happened. Remember when you fell off the boat? Okay, it's almost kind of like that. It's like somebody adding some things in, saying, hey, these are great Proverbs too. We need to include these from Solomon. Okay, but they come from other people. Then there's the sayings of Agar, okay, and that's from what is that? That looks like 20, I typed that wrong. That's like 22 to 24. And then finally, the sayings of King Lemuel. And that's the same thing, of people coming and saying, hey, these are other things about Solomon that were great that are added in. So Solomon didn't write that. That's where other people wrote it. But the people who watched the canon said, yes, that all goes together in one writing and was passed down through history as one writing with those things put together. So that's what we're going to be studying, and we start off with really simple things. There's a couple of things that we'll talk about next week when we get into it, but I thought it was very interesting that there's a lot of talk in there about lady wisdom, okay? I think it's very important that wisdom has a female shade to it, okay? That we need to pay attention. Any mistakes I've made in business and investing, my wife has said, "Are you sure?" And I went, yeah, I got this. Well, guess what? 10, 20 years later, I didn't get it. I should have listened to her because her intuitiveness is more than mine. I'm a great business mind. She has far more intuitiveness, and she's a great business mind too, okay? And then when it talks about bad, what happens, it has a female and a male tone to it, the way they call it, okay? And it's very straightforward and very true. And when you read it, it's just so simple. I've read Proverbs over and over and over. There's 31 Proverbs, and how many days in the most month? 31. So if you ever wonder, if you go, man, I need something from the Word, you figure out what the date is. Today's the 15th. You open up to Proverbs 15, and you just start reading. And when you've read it one way, like sometimes I'll read it in, I have on the Bible app, you know, there's like, 72 versions of the Bible now. Okay, and so I read it in different versions each month, so I kind of get a different take. Because what I get out of like the old King James, which has some neat language, sometimes the these and thous are really cool. Other times you go, what in the world do they mean? So then you can read the Message, and the Message almost makes it so simple that like my 8-year-old grandson can understand, okay? And you've got to have the two. The ESV version is the one that is supposedly the most true to the original text, okay, overall. But there's pros and cons to a lot of them. And if you haven't read it, I mean, there's a couple of them. There's one called the Ghetto Bible. There's another one called the Surfer's Bible. And it's very different. You know, I mean, the Surfer's Bible's got things like, hey, dude, man, you can't believe how righteous Jesus was. You know? I mean, some stuff like that. And you kind of go like, you know what? He is cool. You know? And some stuff like that. And so there's lots of ways to get the Word. When I'm debating someone on doctrine, I want to go to the ESV to say, okay, I can go look at the Greek or the Hebrew or the Aramaic, and it's going to look like this, okay? But other times when I'm going, huh? Sometimes I read it in the Message and go, oh, okay. You know, that's what I need. So think about it. Other people didn't have that. Even in today's world, when I used to travel for Shell internationally, a lot of times I'd call people and say, what can I bring for you? And they would say, bring us big bottles of aspirin and big bottles of Pepto-Bismol and some blue jeans, and bring us a bunch of little Bibles. So the Bibles that all of us have, probably 3 or 4 in the house, of the little Gideon's Bibles, I used to take 12 to 20 of those. And they were, sometimes they would take pages or just chapters and give a chapter or a book to somebody, and then another person got another book. We take it for granted. We have, what, 12 Bibles in our house, plus on our phone we've got all those versions. I mean, it's an amazing book that has survived over 3,000 years, actually 6,000 years if you count the oldest texts and stuff, being challenged, and it still cannot be challenged. If you go online when somebody says, oh, the Bible's not true because it says this, this, and this, every time there's a new finding, they find in support of the Bible, not against the Bible. And it blows you away. I don't know if you guys saw this week. Remember how I taught on Jonah and the whale? And people say, that's a fairy tale because there's no whales in the Mediterranean. Down in South America, a place where there's never been blue whales, a giant blue whale showed up this week for the first time in all recorded history. So could God have sent a whale into the Mediterranean? Absolutely he could, okay? So when people pick on little things like that, that's not a reason to not believe the Bible. That's a reason to dig in deeper, to be able to witness to them on why they're not reading all of it, okay? So anyway, I just wanted to give an introduction and make sure we were on time for our 1 hour target. I will tell you that invite people for next week, okay? Bring them along. If you can make it, make it. If you can't, you can't. There's no guilt, but we're here. We're open for business. God is waiting for you. Come see him. Come hang out with us for a while. Get your batteries recharged. It's a hard week to make it from Sunday to Sunday, right? It's really nice just to be together. I mean, where else can you go and get free muffins and all that afterwards after a good message, all right? So anyway, I'm going to close in prayer, and we will have met our time obligation too. So Father God, we thank you for this first restart of our midweek service. And we're not here out of duty. We're here because we love you. And we're here to share with people and to pray with people, and maybe even in a smaller, more intimate setting. And we thank you for everybody that is here. We thank you for the people who are each giving in their own way. I love the fact that some of the younger people are getting involved in the singing and the preaching and all that. That turns me on. I really like that. Anyway, in Jesus' sweet name, we love you. Be with us the rest of the week. Amen.